And we're live. Welcome back to the Weekly Roundup. You get the trifecta of, I had something witty to say, but I don't. You get us three today. Let's talk about it. Terry's going to kick us off in a second here. Kind of big news for MindBody Online users. Finally, the day has come where you can purchase a contract in the MindBody app. Hallelujah.
Ooh, hallelujah. Praise the Lord.
It's ridiculous that we're having yeah, exactly. Like it only took 24 years or whatever it is. Yeah. But kind of great news because it just simplifies your purchase process. These like hacks that we have, for example, direct to membership, like in the app, there's this first month and then you like manually purchase this thing here. You will not need to do that anymore. You can just have your contract in there and be set up properly the first time. People can purchase it and then move forward. So then the question becomes though, okay, cool. How do we set it up? Is there anything different to know about setting up, et cetera, et cetera? So I'm gonna let Terry pipe in on this, but well, yeah, Terry, why don't you take it from there?
Okay. All right. So first I'm going to get a few of my pet peeves out of the way. All right. So before I do that, I'm not so good at Josh and multitasking. I've got to drop this link here real quick into our.
Oh, as you're putting the link in. Yeah. So for those of you who don't use MindBody, I think one of the important things to look at for any system, I mean, it's 2023. And with every passing year at this point, we have to understand that the speed of change around technology will be exponentially faster. It's not even going down the AI rabbit hole, just in general, it will be exponentially faster than you have ever previously experienced. We are on the precipice of technology surpassing the general public understanding to such a degree that like we've never seen it before. So that's just what's happening. It's interesting. That's a long-winded way of saying, if you're looking at any platform to use, we have to consider what does it do for your studio? What does it do for your client? And how can those things become a match made in heaven? So the simple idea that like, I'm going to find you online for sure. There's no other way I'm going to find you first. Basically doesn't exist. I'm going to sign up and book my first class online on an app, in an aggregator, through Google directly, something. And with things like direct to membership being one of the best examples of why this is so important, you need that process to be as streamlined and easy as possible. So that's really when we're looking at in a modern platform, like what you should look for more than anything else. This is the first time I've ever said something like this, but like I would actually give up some reporting capabilities for better client customer flow in a system. Prior to now, I would have said the reporting take precedent would solve that another way, but I would do that. So Terry, go ahead. How does a MindBody new contract system work? Is there anything different anyone needs to do, et cetera, et cetera?
There's no, based on it, there's nothing different you have to do. The contracts are still set up the way they've always been set up. One of the things, so basically, if you have it to sell online, then it's going to start appearing in the app. Now, the one thing we're waiting to get clarification on is the dreaded fees, right? So we know now that there are app fees that are charged. And also, especially with Apple and soon to be Google, if you have, say, anything in your online description about the contract, including anything virtual, make sure you just expunge virtual from the description and just put other perks available. And then you can talk about those other perks when you're selling the membership or the contract. Because if you recall, last year there was the big debate that now if it says virtual, they're going to charge a higher fee and all this kind of stuff. So the way to avoid that is just not to mention it unless it's a virtual only contract. So that's a whole nother aside. In terms of fees itself, we're just getting clarification on what the fees are going to be charged and when they're going to be charged. So we'll get back to you when we've got some information on that. With regards to just some pet peeves of mine, and I see.
Hang on, Terry, hang on. Let's just clarify this. I think that for all systems, this matters too, right? We're talking about fees from the MindBody app because there's an additional fee
Correct.
that if someone, because the Mind Body app would be similar to like ClassPass or something in that it's a separate
entity, almost
aggregator entity almost that people can discover you and purchase from.
Yes.
It's a long since been going on annoyance debate around the ethics of this and how it works or whatever else. But the truth is, it's kind of normal in a lot of business. It's just one of the bigger ones and only ones. But the point would be, it's not just the payment processing fees. You're not going to get away from that. Don't even try to get away from payment processing fees. You just can't do good business when you do that. It's a fact of life. But the additional fees with the app and stuff like that, that's what we're actually talking about.
Yes.
So at this point, let me ask this before you go to your pet peeves. So at this point, I don't think that there's another aggregator that charges in this way. Like there's another app. No, that's not true. Google would. If you had a direct from Google booking, then the Google would actually charge a fee.
I would say that MindBody's the first one within this space that charges that. I mean, and other industries, yes, there's like a service fee tacked on. And truthfully, I think just based on everything that's happening with price and costs and things like that, is that although price does not equal cost, hashtag Terry's dad, we can talk about that another time, is that companies are looking for ways to help offset expenses. Now, just again, a rabbit hole, Amazon just announced they're going to start charging for some returns. And it's going to be, if you're going to like the UPS store, because they have an affiliation with Kohl's, which is looked through Whole Foods, so it's less expensive. Anyway, so someone as big as Amazon is now going to start charging, I think it's going to be like $1. But in the Amazon world, that $1 is going to add up to hundreds of millions of dollars that they're saving in processing returns. So that aside, so fees are here to stay. It's just in our space, it's MindBody is the elephant in the room. And so they're the ones that have started at doing it. I wouldn't be surprised if perhaps other software platforms start doing it. So again, to Josh's point, we're specifically talking about fees for the app, not merchant processing fees. And then just in terms of best practices for contracts, right? So, and this really applies to all the different platforms out there, is that you want to have a contract or a membership for each level of membership. And so making sure that you set the contract up correctly when you start. And then after that, what I see a lot of happening is you go to change the price, but you're going to only do it for, let's say, new people coming in, right? So rather than creating a new contract, what I see a lot happening, and particularly in MindBody, is you'll go in to the contract, you'll take out the old pricing option and you'll put in the new pricing option, and then you'll start selling that contract. And then maybe you're doing a special discount on for something and you'll go in and do the same thing. Bad dog. That is really not a good way to do it, because this is the reason why. If in the future you want to raise the price for the people that maybe are on the oldest price, and now you have 100 people on this old price, you've got all these people on this new price, and you need to raise the 100 people because the contracts are all intermingled. The only way you're going to be able to do that is by going in and manually reselling all those 100 people the contract with the price you want, paying in the patootie. Whereas if let's say you start off at 99 and then you go to 119 and then you go to 139, if you have a separate membership contract for each one of those, you need to raise the 99 people to 119. All that you have to do is go into the 109 contract, change the pricing option, and then boom, the next time that membership renews, they're going to get charged the new price. That's it, as opposed to having to resell all those contracts. So that's just one thing you want to really be clear about, is making sure that every time you want a different price, make a new contract. It really doesn't take that long, and it's going to save you tons of time on the back end. And then also just looking at making sure you've got all the I's dotted and T's crossed, and making sure, again, that you have the online description filled in, you have the membership agreement filled in, which we're going to talk a little bit about that. Josh has some opinions, and I agree with that on the membership agreement. And so that's just you're ever unsure about, particularly with Mind Body, how to set up a contract, just, give me a DM, right? And actually I've got a video in there on how to set up the direct to membership, 2 different options. And if you're ever unsure, we also do, for those of you on Mind Body, if you ever want to do a site audit, this is a shameless plug, but we do offer a site audit feature that if you want me to go in and review your site and make recommendations how to optimize it, that is a service we provide. So again, if you're interested, just send me a message in the Mighty Network and we can talk about that. So yeah, I can go down lots of rabbit holes on that, but I don't want to spend the whole time on that. But let's talk about membership agreements. Do we need them? What's the purpose of them? And are we making it harder for people to get a habitual yoga practice and get into our space and practice yoga?
I want to just comment, Terry, before we jump in there, on this idea of like making a new, like anytime you change price or change parameters, make a new contract in other systems than Mind Body. In Mind Body, that's easy because you can discontinue something.
Yes.
The people on it will still have it. It'll
Yes.
still charge them. It just won't be available for future purpose. In
Correct.
other systems, that discontinue option doesn't exist. So basically, if you do what we're describing, you're going to end up with like 3, 4, 5, 6 different auto pays that would potentially all be visible for someone to purchase in the system.
Unless you don't sell it online.
Unless you don't sell them online. And then some systems don't allow you to differentiate online or not online. But the point would be, I would still do this. And because of the reporting associated with it, then you can report and say, I have 10 people at this, 15 at that, 8 at this. And the theory here is it's beyond just not a best practice, that if you have legacy clients at a price point that is 20% or more lower than where you are right now, at some point, like, we've got to move them up. They've got to transition in some way. Because in theory, if you're getting busier and your classes are more full and you have more people coming in, it's not that we want to just jack the price up on them, to make more money, because obviously even at a lower price, if they're legacy, they have done a lot of positive cash flow for your business. It's more just like, out of efficiency, fairness for everything, at some point, like, we've got to balance that. And we've seen that a lot in the last year, especially going into studios, where we have people who are paying a price from like literally 2016 sort of thing. And they're paying, in one case, it was half of what the current rate was. So even if your system doesn't allow this discontinue thing that Mind Body does, I would still, every time you change price and do something new, if you're going to leave people alone, I would make it as a new contract, because then it's in your face. Like, then you don't forget about it. Then it's not hidden. Then you can't use the like soft excuse that Terry's talking about of like, well, I would have to go in individually times 300 and whatever else. Then it's like, it's there in your face every time, and your reporting is going to tell you about it every single time. So it's going to keep it on your radar, which is actually kind of a powerful thing to do.
The other thing, just a suggestion as well, is when you're thinking about naming your membership, is we ran into this at an onsite we did last month, and they had the price. It's like, membership one, whatever member. And then when they switched to the iPad self check-in, that since that was the membership name, that was what was showing up on the iPad check-in, and people were going, well, how come Carol's paying $20 less than I am? Why can't I get that?
No, hang on. That's not true. That didn't happen. That didn't happen.
It did too happen.
It did. The owner pointed it out and we caught it. I didn't hear a client do that. Did that actually happen?
I absolutely did, because there was, remember, it was, I did hear it. So just be careful that, remember what you name, depending on the system, you want to make sure that the name that appears when either on the website or on a check-in app or something like that, it has, you can, whatever you want. Just, I would strongly encourage you not to include the price, right? And if there's a signifier, you could have like, I know, you come up with like cute little names if you want, whatever it is, or it could be, but just, again, it's just a word of caution. Danger, Will Robinson.
Be aware that happens.
Be aware that.
Although I have to say though, like, you shouldn't ever be embarrassed about what you sell anything at. Like you
No, I
should,
get it.
right? Like if you have someone who's paying such a lower price than you, that a new member would be like, how come Josh gets it for 79, and that would embarrass you and you would feel bad about it, then that's a problem. You should fix that problem rather than, like, transparency should be part of this. People know you sell things at different prices. Everyone does in every industry, you know?
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah.
when, you know what that makes me think of actually, Terry, is, and Carol, I think when you had your studio, you guys did something like this. But very often at a studio I was just at, we just simplified their pricing model to be, there's the membership price and there's the membership special price. Because prior to that, what we had was like, students got this discount, seniors got this discount. And it was like service.
First responders, sometimes
first responders and firefighters never got this discount. Military had this discount, and they were all like kind of, and then, oh, and if you bought during your intro, you got this discount. But then if it was a student, it was a different one. So it was like, it was impossible to know what the fuck anyone was paying. And the team was super confused. You had to like check a chart every time, you know? So instead, we just said, look, there's the price, and then there's the special price. And we made the decision in this studio's instance, this is a fit in a lot of cases, where we just said, look, if you're special for any reason, you get the special price, and you can decide who's special. Students are special, old fogies are special, whatever. Yeah, that was what ours was called in the studios, old fogies.
Well, thank you very much as an old fogey.
But you just decide, or you're like, I'm having a sale, it's the special price. Like no one gets less than this, period.
I like that.
And we use the special price as the discounted option on the intro. So technically, everyone had an opportunity to get the best price at some point.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like fair across the board. And then if anyone comes up and they're like, hey, do you have a discount for students? Sure, we do. Special price. Hey, I'm on my intro. Do I get any special deal if I sign up before it's over? You're darn right you do. Special price. Hey, I'm a first responder or whatever. Like, yep, special price. Like the answer is always yes, and the answer is always special price. So it made it really streamlined for the team.
I like that.
Yeah, so sometimes I think like decomplicating your pricing as well. But the point would be, in that instance, it's really easy for you to be totally transparent and be like, it's $129, our special price is $119. And then everyone will have access to the special price at some point, and they either choose to take you up on it or not. Then it's fair, and it just cleans it up for everyone. Yeah,
I like that. I had a thought, and again, it died.
Carol, what did you guys do with discounts on auto pay, or what have you seen that's like worked?
Well, I mean, I think like you're saying, keeping it simple and one thing for everybody across the board was the way to go. Because if I can't remember as the owner who gets what, like how is my team gonna know? And for ease of training my team, the one like 10% off or whatever it was definitely a plus for us. Because it's hard enough sometimes to get the team on board and understanding the process. And if you have 5 different discounts for 5 different customers, it just makes it so much more challenging. So I like that, just keeping it one thing. It's
very simple. Yeah. And I also I wanted to circle back to what you said, Josh, real quick about, raising prices and just to raise price to make more money versus there's a reason why. And I've just had this happen where a client was freaking out about they had some heavy power users, right, that were coming a lot during month, and their revenue per client, all this stuff. Then I dived into it. This exact thing is those power users were on, so they wanted to add a whole nother level of membership for new people coming in, but that didn't address the root cause of what they had. This whole group of people that, to Josh's point, were paying almost half of what their current membership rate is. And these people were coming like a lot. So rather than and they just redid their pricing, rather than adding this other tier of exclusive membership, which wasn't going to address the root issue of the fact that they had this whole group of people, about 30 of them, that are paying like half. So that's the other thing when you're looking at, you know, if you're raising price, and a point to being and having those people separated out. So, you know, okay, I've got this bucket of people that I need to raise up. And that can happen too. And that's why separating it out. And again, if you need help doing that, you can book a call with any of the coaches. And we have strategies to help you tier people up. If you are in that case where you have people with really old pricing options and you need to bring them back up to what the current rate is. So, you know, it's okay to do that. It is okay to do that. Sorry, Josh, I should point that out.
No, not at all. It's not only okay, it's a good idea. It's hard. It's a hard move. And the truth is, we talked about this before in the roundup, like when you do that, you'll piss someone off. That'll happen. So like your fear of, I don't want to piss people off is valid. You will. But at some point, it just gets ridiculous. Now, it doesn't mean you have to do it either. It depends on the number of people. It's like a sort of a case by case for how you would approach that. But yeah. The other thing this is making me think of, though, is who should get a discount in the studio. And this came up in a pretty big way with a couple studios I was talking with recently. Because of exactly the situation I was talking about. It's like first responders got a discount, students got a discount, seniors got a discount. And there was another one that was like, oh, it was like hospital nurses specifically, but like not hospital doctors. Like it was like something like that. So, and that had all like kind of come out of COVID a little bit too.
Yeah.
So whatever, the point was just like, where do you draw the line where someone doesn't get a discount? How do you get proof of these things if you're going to do it, or do you even enforce on that? And then from a fairness standpoint, I always use like the thing that always sticks out in my mind is like, what about the single mom with 3 kids?
I was going to say that.
Who's like, I can come here once a week, maybe, like, and they're like working 2 jobs or whatever, or I don't know. What about the person who just has a bad turn in life and they're just like on the grind, but they're still trying to keep their head straight and they're doing your yoga practice? Like, do they get a discount? You know, like, because it's embarrassing for someone to be like, hey, like, I just can't afford this. I need a discount. It's unlikely people come and say that to you. So the point would be, who shouldn't get a discount at some point? So I think that if you're having a standard on your website built-in discount, beyond this, the fact that it should be as simple as possible, like Carol was saying, I think also who should get it needs to be for a specific reason. Like, and it's easy to come up with a rational, logical reason for all the people I just described. But what I'm saying is like, why, if you are in town where you do not have a major university and like 50 to 70% of your student base coming in is not university students who are perpetually asking you for a student discount, why do you have a student discount then?
I didn't.
Like you probably don't need it. So same thing, like first responders. I mean, this is a group of healthy people who need to de-stress and come and do yoga to keep everything in balance, but like they've got a full-time job and are working hard, and like, yeah, thank you for your service. I'm not taking away from that, but like, are you in an area where there's just like an enormous amount of first responders who are coming in and actively saying like, hey, I'm a first responder, can I get a discount?
No.
Or like same thing like military town or not. So just, I'm not for or against any group of people getting the discount. What I'm suggesting though is I would think about it from the perspective of the reason I'm going to offer this group a discount in my studio is because it's a significant portion of the people coming in. It means something to me. It means something to them. They're asking for it. I need to be able to say yes to them coming and asking. The students are a great example because students will come in and they'll ask you, hey, I'm a student. Do you have student discounts? You want to be able to say yes to that.
But in the meantime, they're ordering Uber Eats every night because they don't like the dorm food.
Sure,
right?
Of course. But this is the thing, like managing people's money is not your job in the studio at all. So
well, it also to what you mentioned too about who should get a discount, and it goes again, just as just a thought, is people will find the money for what's important to them. And I had friends years ago that hit a really rough financial spot. And so she told me that the 2 bills they paid every month without fail, they paid their rent and then they paid their yoga membership. And then they figured out the rest. Because for them, the yoga membership was so important to them that it helped with every other part of their life. So there is that thought that if something is incredibly important to you and it's something you do and you get a passion and joy or whatever, it's solving a problem or something for you, then the reality is you're going to find the money to do it, which is why you hear about single moms or working families, that they're doing these amazing things because they're prioritizing things, right? So sometimes, I mean, I'm just throwing this out there. I'm not saying do or not. I'm casting shade on anybody, just saying it is an interesting thought experiment that if it's important enough, you'll find the money for it. And if someone truly can't afford it, then they're probably not even coming to the studio in the first place. They might not, if they're truly struggling, they might not even be able to afford the intro offer, which then if you wanted to create a community program, and if that's something that you really want to solve for, then there's ways to do that, right? But to just like randomly have all these discounts, to Josh's point, is what's the process? It goes to what is the process behind this and what is the problem you're trying to solve?
Yeah. I think that it's a great point that like if someone really can't afford it, they'll either tell you or they won't even be there, is the most likely situation. And then find another way. I was going to add to this too, that like, if there are special focus groups in your area that you want to do something for, like you want to give a discount, you don't have to just build it in that they get this discount. The alternative thing to do is you run a campaign. So you're like, for the month of March or the month of April, first responders get a free class and get a discount, like get access to them. But it's like, it's a specific campaign in a moment in time. And then you can rotate through, would be the other way to do that, rather than it just being built into the permanent pricing model that you have or whatever. All right, let's change gears here a little bit. Carol, what the heck should you have in your contract with your auto pay? And I don't know, what did you guys do with that? Now that we can sell a contract in MindBody, but for any studio, you should have some form of a contract in place when they agree to purchase with you. What should be in there? Who should write it? What the checkout flow with that? I think there's a lot of things around that to unpack.
The first thing I thought of was make sure Corey has written it for you. So, or some other professional. I know that as we went through COVID, it was very clear that, it was a little bit dicey in the beginning, like, can we still charge people when we're shut down? And so that really forced a lot of us studio owners to figure that out and reevaluate our contracts at that point to make sure that, we can, if the studio is unforeseen shut down due to something like that again, that we can continue charging them per the contract. So one, having a professional write it is for sure a must. We personally did not put everything in the receipt. I know some people in the contract, don't they, like in the receipt, you see the whole thing like written out. Ours is really long after we had it professionally then. It was a lot. So they definitely had to, sign off at the studio, whether in person or online. And if you are signing up online, we do, I know there's like now Josh has some opinions on, stopping them at the front desk and having them do initials for each line. But if we were signing them up in studio, we did have a little line next to each line item that they needed to initial and then sign off at the bottom. Is everyone reading it? No. But I think what's most important is the communication from the front desk that you will continue to be charged after this first initial charge, like for us, because we did direct to membership for our intro. That was the most important thing. We needed to get the communication out there, not only through the contract, but people aren't going to read that rightfully. So we needed it on our website. We needed the front desk to be able to really communicate that you're doing our intro, but it's going to roll right into membership. So I don't know. Those are my initial thoughts. I know Josh was kind of thinking about.
Well, I just to add one thing that I had on my website was I had a link to a PDF of the membership agreement. So, I mean, I sent it out all the other usual ways, but you want to see that, I had a link there. I don't know if I never checked to see if any looked at it, but you could do that. And then the other thing you said that triggered something for me, Carol, again, I can't think of it, but that was the one thing. It's just having it available. I think the transparency is good. And yes, to Carol's point, that's what I was gonna say. It really helped when we too shut down. And one of the things I did at that point though, and you can do this. Oh, this was the other thought I had. I'm sorry, man, my brain's scattered today. Is one thing you can set yourself up for success is on your website when you're advertising your direct to membership, are you still calling it an intro offer? Because if you're calling it an intro offer, even though you might further down, it says direct to, this you will be charged. We've really trained the public really well. When they hear intro, they're thinking it's an intro, it ends, right? We've done a really good job to do that. So rather than calling it intro, call it new member special or first half off, first month of membership, something that is really clear right on the website when they're looking at it, that they know that this is a membership, because membership has a very different connotation than intro offer. And I had a client that was having this experience because she's like, I don't know why. Again, all these people are canceling at the end of their first month because they didn't know it was a contract. Even I said, and we went on intro offer. And as soon as we changed that within a very quick amount of time, the amount of people that were canceling in their first month dropped dramatically just by
changes the expectation. Yeah.
Changing the expectation, right? So again, go back and look at your site. And then the other thing too is making sure you're calling it the same thing throughout all your marketing. Because you can looked at one website, they called it this on this page, on this, on the, like 3 different names. What is it? So in all your communications, all your whatever you land on, make sure it's consistent throughout your entire organization, even at the front desk. I've heard, people call it different things. So land on the name, if it's direct to membership, and take the word intro out of it.
Yeah, I like that. I think that with going back to something Carol said too, like, our preferred partner is Corey Sterling from Conscious Counsel. He also has the Law is Fun website, which is like a self-serve. It's not the same thing as these other sites where you just get a template. You're purchasing a templated package from him, but he and his actual legal team customize it completely for your studio. So that's in my opinion, the single best place to get your stuff, because it's the best balance of custom, but also affordability in there or whatever. And just because we have lots of new people in the group, we haven't had this conversation for a while, we cannot under any circumstance recommend that you would borrow another studio's contract and just use it. I know it seems like it's that simple, but that is not the best practice, basically. But then the question becomes, do you even need a lawyer to write anything? Just put some lines in there. This says I'm going to charge you, Terry, every month, and you got to cancel by giving me 7 days notice. Isn't that enough? And it's interesting because nowadays that is a fair debate point, more than it has been. To Carol's point, though, I would still recommend that you have a proper legal document created, because a legal document creates clarity of exactly expectations for a worst case scenario situation, which might be something that's totally unforeseen by you. So
like a pandemic.
Right. So where legal documents interesting, and Corey actually in a couple of times has come on and done a webinar, or he and I have talked about this a lot. It's something terrible happens and the studio gets sued or something like that. The very first thing that he does, if it's one of his clients, they just go look at what's the contract, what's the agreement, what's the whatever else associated with the disgruntled person. And if it's all in there, it doesn't even go further. He just says, here's the legal document, photo of this person that signed, sends it to their lawyer, and the whole thing's over right there. Because that's it in 90% of cases. If it's not there, then people go fishing for more whatever. And that's where it gets tricky. So it's just smart to protect yourself that way. From a coaching standpoint, our job as well is just to be like, don't put your business or your personal self at risk unnecessarily. You know, there's always some risk in business, of course, but just this kind of risk is just totally unnecessary. That being said, we used to recommend, even in 2019, because chargebacks were such an annoyance for people and everything else, we used to really recommend that you would like verbally, and we did this in our studio as well, you would verbally tell at the front desk the person who's signing up, this is what you're signing up for, and here's the like 3 major conditions you have to know. We would get them to physically sign the contract. They would get a copy of the contract emailed to them, and it would be noted in the receipt notes. It was like way overkill. But as soon as the whole team that we had switched to doing that, and at studios that we put that in place, the number of chargebacks that you got was massively reduced. It was like less than half across the board. I think that my opinion has changed. That's not what we're seeing as happening now. Whether you do that or not, the number of chargebacks you get is the same. It's a low number. And if it's a higher number, it's because there's a lack of clarity in what Terry is talking about. You've called it something wrong. Your team didn't tell people about it. It was not clear in the purchase step. And the contract is irrelevant because people now, and with credit card companies perpetually screwing small business as their number one scapegoat, they don't care what they signed. They're going to do the chargeback anyways. And although we, like in the day, I won at least 10 chargebacks because of our system in place. Nowadays, even when we have stuff in place for a lot of studios, it doesn't matter. Or you win the first chargeback and the person just does it again. And it's like, it becomes not even worth it. So I'm starting to think from a sales process standpoint. I'd be curious, Carol, what you think about this, and Terry, you too. Like, I think I would just tell them, like, I would just sell it to them, tell them exactly what it is. I would definitely have an automated email that goes afterwards. That's like, here's what you signed up for. Here's the agreement. They still have to like check a box or sign something somewhere for sure. There still has to be an agreement. But the whole like read this thing and whatever else and that whole part of it, I would just eliminate it from the sales process, whether online or in studio, completely. It's just unnecessary friction and doesn't seem to make a difference.
I'm just sort of thinking about like, how can you just avoid chargebacks altogether to, you know, as much as you can. There, of course, they can still happen, but it's the communication point, I think, is the most important. I've noticed some studios don't do like an automatic email going out every time that a person gets charged, and that can be really bad down the road if, you know, the student doesn't realize that they've been charged for 6 months and then it comes back later. So do your best to communicate, because if somebody does see that email and they get back to you the next day and you want to be nice about it, you can return it and then it's done. You know, it's you as a studio, you understood that there was miscommunication and let it go. It's fine, you know, return it. But it's a problem when it's 6 months or longer down the road and somebody hasn't been and they didn't know they were being charged. That gets really hairy. I mean, even if it's in the contract, even if they wrote it, it doesn't feel great. You know, on
yeah, you're going to get you're going to get a what's the opposite of a brand evangelist? You know, you're going to get someone who's pissed off with you anyways.
There was actually a very good conversation because this happened to one of our clients. It was I'll try to find it and link it in the roundup, in the recap about this very thing happening. It had been a year and a half.
Right.
And it was almost like $2,000. So I can't remember right now. There's a lot of advice from a lot of people in the YC. It was a really good post. So I'll link it down there. And I can also say, I only had, in the time I had my studio, I think I maybe had less than like maybe 4 or 5 chargebacks, about 1 a year, which is really low. And the one I did dispute, because I'm like, they sided with the consumer, and then they said if I wanted to contest it, I could. Now this was pre-pandemic, it may have changed since then, but if I contested it and lost, I would be charged $500. If they found, so if I contested the chargeback and they found again, I sound like I'm in court, and they found again for the consumer, then not only would I get the chargeback, I would also be fined, or I'd also have to pay $500 for the, I guess, probably to cover their costs. So I'm like, at this point, I'm like, I'm talking $99 here. I just refunded.
Who cares?
it.
Yeah.
Who cares, right? So that was a whole interesting thing. And I just wanted to, again, talking about, what do you need to have in the contract? But again, I also say that having something in legal is good, and then just keeping really simple at the front desk. And, Corey did all my legal agreements, and he did all the legal documentation for my sale of my studio. And that actually really helped, because I had my studio sold before the pandemic. We were scheduled to close on March 18th, 2020, 3 days before, right? 3 days before that we shut down. That sale fell through. And because we had a strong purchase agreement, they were claiming they should not have to lose their deposit. We were able to make it very simple, and it worked out well. So Corey for legal documents, and like selling studio, Carol. Did you see that segue? Josh, I made that segue.
That was a great one, Terry. Very nice. Yeah, so I have a couple of clients who are opening studios, and one of them sort of caught me off guard, because she said, well, you and so many of the coaches have sold your studios. What made you sell? Why are you no longer studio owners? And I had to, think about it a little bit. I mean, for me, it had been 19 years, and I think I was just ready for a change. I didn't want the lease on my, in my conscience, like another 5 years or so, and just ready for a change. And I think that it looks easy from the outside. It's not an easy job. It's fun and it's rewarding. What makes it easier is coaching, having a coach to help you for sure. Because we were probably in the business for like 14 years before we found the YC and started to really make significant changes. So I think we all do it for different reasons, and we get out for different reasons. I kind of told her with the pandemic, I think we all got a little agitated with like, where am I right now, and where do I want to be after, we get out of this. And yeah, just for me, it happened to be like, I think it's time for a change, So that was my answer, but I don't know about you guys.
Well, I also say too, is I always coach clients is like, what is your exit strategy? Because if you're opening a studio, to your Carol's point with clients opening a studio, at some point in the future, maybe it's 19 years. In my case, it was 5 years. Is like, what is your exit strategy? Whether you're 25 or 55, when you open your studio, at some point, you're going to want to do something with it. And what does that look like? So I think part of it is in selling your business, that is something you should be thinking about selling, or whatever, or giving it to your kids, or whatever it is, needs to be part of your whole business journey. And as Josh will say, you start from the end goal and you work backwards. And I say personally, for me, a lot of you know my story is I bought my studio, I was 53. I was not from New England. I knew I was going to sell it from day one, because I wasn't going to retire in New England. So from day one, I knew I was going to sell it. And I was thinking 12 to 15 years, 63 to 65. It wasn't the pandemic that accelerated it. Is my mother passed away in early 2019. And I really realized I want to be closer to family. And because I was so inspired by my coach, that I decided that best time to sell is when your studio's at the top. Time to sell and move into coaching, which is why I'm here today, right? I just accelerated the timeline. So that's why I decided to sell. But I knew from day one I was going to sell. So I would challenge you, if you don't have an exit strategy for your business, you really should think about one, because you never know. Like for me, I sold initially very quickly, because I had run it like that from day one. Everything was up to date. It was successful. It was profitable. I had everything in order, all the processes. And whether like I'm working with some clients right now, I'm working with a client right now, she's getting ready to run her studio remotely from Costa Rica. Right. So she's not selling it yet, but she's going to run it remotely. And so having all those processes in place to do it helps you do that. We have several clients in the YC now that run their studios remotely.
Yeah.
So I think why somebody sells their studio is a very different thing. It's just the end game is you want to do with something someday. So what does that someday look like? What about you, Josh?
Yeah, well, before I jump in on that, like side note, we have someone who is running their studio remotely, and the studio is a single location, single room, 7-figure studio. Like their problem is actually that the value of their business is so high, they tried to sell it and there was no one who could afford to buy it. And it was like, it made no sense to take a haircut on the sell part of it because it cash flows so well. So that's like a fluke exit strategy. We're just like, let's not sell it. And it's been a couple of years now and it's just keeps growing and keeps going. So like, that's all possible as well. So I think it's important to hear that. We hear about studios that shut down because they suck and they struggle and they close and whatever else. But the story of like what a hyper successful studio is, no one's out there in the Facebook friggin' studio owners group squawk boxing about how awesome they are. Like that's not what we hear. So it's important to like know that narrative. For us, I mean,
I was gonna say, Josh, because if we do, we're accused of being business bitches and not yogis.
that can happen. Yeah.
That happened to me.
It's a weird narrative. Yeah. It's a weird narrative
that you're not supposed to make money if you have a yoga studio.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the dumbest statement ever. I've heard people straight say it though. It's the same thing. Like, I don't believe in selling. They're like, well, I don't know what to tell you. Do you believe in paying your bills? Like, so that's a whole nother rabbit hole. There's some psychology there, but for Jenna and I, so for years, and this is in the video courses and stuff for decision making in the YC here as well. We have a thing called a polarity square or a choice quadrant. And there's also fear setting. Those are the two techniques that I've used for a long time. Those are the ones out there. But the idea of the polarity square is you have your new desire versus your current desire. And it's not a pros cons list. It's to try to get to the emotional place of how you feel about these two desires. Do I keep my business and keep going? Do I exit my business? So what's fascinating, and some of you have heard the story before, we were moving to Colombia, and in sort of transit across Canada, we were managing a studio in Kingston, Ontario, and then started having this debate, well, maybe we shouldn't move to Colombia, and instead, let's open our own yoga studio. Like it's like we're gonna go back and open a big studio. And we were trying to come up with like which direction to go, quite literally, which direction to go. And so we did the polarity square, and what we uncovered was the desire differential. So current desire, move there, new desire, open the studio, was actually that we wanted to build a community. We were like looking for that. We wanted to build that. We had a personal mission around that. And it was, both of us interpreted what we put down clear as fucking day. We need to go and open this studio. So we did. 10 years later, we did the exact same thing again while traveling. Should we pass the torch and sell the studio? Because we had kind of like accomplished, we felt like, what's the next phase for the studio? No problems. It's making tons of money. We've got a great team. We're taking 30 days straight of vacation right now. But like, we both were feeling like we're not working towards a specific goal. So we were like, let's reiterate that goal. We did the polarity square. Do we pass the torch versus do we keep the studio and move to a new thing? And we both interpreted what we put down as let's pass the torch. After we sold the studio, we came back and we sold it. After we sold the studio, we found the original one, polarity square, from starting the studio, and compared it with the one that we did for selling the studio. And what was on there was almost exactly the same fucking thing. So to me, it was like this perfect example of how you can't logically rationalize your way into decisions and it's like we talk in sales, all purchase decisions are made emotionally first and then backed up with logic, backed up with rationale. So the same thing, like when you're asking the question, I would read between the lines of Carol saying, like, we've got people who are starting a studio and they're like, you've all sold your studios, what's up? What you might be looking for is confirmation of negative ego and fear, being like, everyone's exiting the studio business because it's a bad business, because I'm not going to make money, because it's like too hard right now. None of that has anything to do with it at all. The same reason why you want to start a studio is the same reason why someone might exit a studio, if it's done right. That's the asterisk. If you're trying to exit a studio because you're absolutely burnt out and you're losing money and everything else, it might be the smartest logical reason to get out of your studio, the smartest business reason. So I'm not saying you wouldn't do that, but if that's the only reason why you're getting out of your studio, that's kind of a bad reason, actually, because it means the equation isn't working. So it's more complex than, you know, exit when you're up versus exit when you're down. I mean, that's an obvious one, but there's an emotional part of it too, where it's like exit when you're prepared to let it go and move on with your life into another phase of doing something as an entrepreneur. And that's the best decision for you. Or don't exit. Be like, I'm just going to keep it and keep going because I'm not done yet. And exiting is not always the thing that you need to do, or at least not in the traditional sense.
And either way, a coach can help with that, right? Whether you're ramping up, whether you're sunrising a studio, sunrising the next part of your career, or you're sunsetting, it's having a plan and a process in place is what makes either end of the spectrum successful, and everything in between. So. Yeah,
not to toot our horn, but all of us had coaches doing our studios and have been coaching for a long time now. And it's not even, it's as far as the data goes, like there's just no question. If you take Studio A starting out, no coach, just flying by the seat of their pants, and Studio B has a coach in their corner, and then you follow those studios over the first 3 years, in like 90% of cases, the coach studio is not just ahead, it's like double or triple ahead for the studio that's not coached. There are exceptions for someone who's just an exceptional entrepreneur, has previous experience, knows what they're doing, whatever, where that's not the case, but there's just, it speeds you up so much. And amongst like, then there's the knowledge and this versus that and where to focus or whatever else. But honestly, the way that it speeds you up more than anything else is kind of similar to this AI conversation and stuff that's going on too, where what your coach has that you learn over time and where they can help you is they know which questions to ask. So it's prompting, right? As a coach, you have enough experience. If we have enough experience after coaching for over a decade now and owning our studios to be like, this realm of studio ownership is an area of focus where we need to ask a few questions and come up with some sort of plan. The specificity of the strategy and the plan is less relevant than the fact that you're looking at it that way and solving for that. That's where it speeds you up significantly with the coach. Either way, you're going to uncover that, like, we need to figure out sales and how to sell in the studio. Like, you're going to run into that because it'll become a necessity of success in the business. The question is, do you wait 2 years and then run into it when you realize it's a problem and finally figure it out in your numbers? Or from day one, are you like, what's our sales system? Because the coach is like, this is like one of the most important things for us to put in place right out of the gate, and it's going to leapfrog you forward. So book a free coaching call. There we go. This didn't mean to turn into total coaching advertisement, but it's just true. Yeah.
True. And if I were to ever do a studio again, which there is that entrepreneurial spirit in me that every so often, and actually have a location picked out, so who knows, I would do it completely different from the get-go. Very, very different than when I would do all the things that we coach on, because it really is it's like thinking about all of the things that need to be thought of. So yeah, it's very powerful. For me, it was the same thing. Once I got my coaches, and I came in with a pretty fair amount of experience in business and small business, even still, and we talk about this a lot. The biggest thing, one of the biggest things that a coach provides is accountability. And as an entrepreneur, that's before I had my coach, it's like, oh, I didn't get it done. There was nobody, why? What are you waiting for, kind of thing. It's like, think back if you were an athlete or on a sports team, even if you were an athlete, you just played sports. It's like your coach held you accountable to what needed to get done. It's no different.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Truth.
shameless.
Well, I think that's, coaching aside, I think that we're at an interesting moment in time. And if you saw my video on this stuff, I comment on this too, but like, for some time now, we've been saying, knowledge isn't power. It's knowledge put into action that is power. But we're going to see that we're already there. And moving forward, we're going to see that to like a real extreme where access to knowledge, it's way beyond internet level stuff here. It's like access to true knowledge and understanding and formulas and problem solving is already higher than it's ever been. And it's going to quadruple 10x, 1000x in the next couple of years. So the question then becomes, if we're looking at this, bring it back down to earth into a business perspective, there's literally zero advantage as an entrepreneur anymore in the next year to 5 years when it comes to, I know this thing, I understand how to do this. The knowledge portion of it, there's no advantage there at all. The only advantage is being able to understand the bigger picture of all of it, take this knowledge and then practically apply it in the business and actually make it happen and come to fruition. That's going to be it's already always been the differentiator, but even more so than ever. If a business is not succeeding in their market versus their competitors, that will be why. It will be the owner's ability to take action and to put things in place, hence the accountability that Terry is talking about, that like, it's getting shit done that's going to be the differentiator, because there's no marketing differential anymore. There's no knowledge differential anymore. The access to finance isn't really a compelling enough differential anymore. So what's left is doing the thing, teaching great yoga. That's it. Teaching great yoga, have a great yoga experience. So, all right. Well, I think that's it for now.
That was a good
Have
one.
a great weekend. Yeah, good thing to leave us off on. Have a great weekend. Post in the comments down below. What do you do? I'm curious, going back to our contracts, what do you do when you sell an auto pay? So does someone e-signature? Do they have to sign something in the studio? What do you actually do there? Let's get that discussion going. So it'd be interesting to see the different formulas for that. And how do we streamline it? Because I think there's more there that we can unpack, and we'll pick it up next week. But have a great weekend. Go do some yoga.
Yes, go do some yoga.
We'll talk to you soon. All right.